John Vecchi, welcome to Mitiga Mic.
Brian, it's good to be back on a podcast together, my friend.
I know we've done hundreds of these together. I think this might be one of the few times where I've either had the chance to interview you or you've had the chance to interview me. So this is kind of fun, actually, a little bit different.
Let's do it. Love it.
Yeah, you wrote an awesome blog with our COO just a little while ago, and I know it pulls from some other blogs and some other content that you've created as well. But it was really fascinating, and anybody that wants to check it out can go to mitiga.io, check out our blog. It's called The Unfixable Gap: Why Perfect SaaS Posture is a Dangerous Illusion. So already I can tell that's a John Vecchi title, and it's a great one. So let's just kick it off. We'll start at a high level. So, you argue that perfect SaaS posture is a dangerous illusion. So what specifically makes this gap unfixable? Is it technical? Is it operational? Is it fundamentally an architectural issue? What's really causing this?
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I mean, it literally touches on all of those. Architectural, it touches the organization. We can talk about that. Look, it comes back to the premise that, look, we need posture controls. I say this again, they're great tools. You need them, right? You look at something like SSPM, which comes in a long list of posture tools. CSPM, CNAP, DSPM, I mean, I could go all along, right? Yeah. And they're phenomenal for identifying your posture, for your configuration management, for configuration visibility and entitlement review and SaaS hygiene and all of those things, right? The issue is, they don't really address when modern cloud attacks get through those, right? So when we think in terms of this unfixable gap, it comes down to like the opening of your question, which is, right, SaaS kind of security, traditional SaaS security, posture-based SaaS security kind of leaves this, what we call this unfixable gap. And why is that, right? So think about it. They identify, let's just take one app. Again, organizations have hundreds of SaaS apps, right? Let's just take one. Maybe it's Salesforce, maybe it's Workday, maybe it's GitHub, GitLab, whatever, it's one. And maybe they identify, 15, 20 main kind of posture gaps, right? Okay, so that's great. They identify those, but they remain open is the premise here, right? You have legacy integrations, there's technical depth. So this is the kind of architectural piece, right? You have existing integrations, trying to go fix those and remediate those gaps can have an impact on what's already there, your technical depth, right? Then you have teams, so you have organizational friction. You have kind of teams that build these these SaaS applications that they use for continuity and speed, for business impact, not security impact. So that's kind of a mindset, and you have to deal with that, right? Then you have kind of this distributed ownership for teams. I own SaaS apps that we use in marketing. I want to use them, right? You can't go change my configurations overnight, right? So all of shadow IT is another one. All of these leave this kind of unfixable gap that in many cases could take a year, maybe 2 years to fix that. In the meantime, those gaps are live, they remain vulnerable. And when you combine that with the method of modern attacks, there you go. This is why we say SSPM alone is not enough. Really, CDR first is advisable before yet another posture tool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And, we were at RSA just a few weeks back, and there was a lot of talks actually about attacks in the cloud, attacks on SaaS, and how to defend from that, and those that are AI enabled, and how do you defend with AI? So all these different levels. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is attackers are going after the most common SaaS apps. And whether that's the top 10, top 15, top 25, whatever that top number is, those are the ones they're targeting. And these are big applications. You rattled off a few, like, Salesforce and Workday and GitHub. These aren't small apps. And to think that you're going to configure your way out of that once you actually discover it and break what marketing's doing, or HR or support or sales, that is just a nightmare. It's so important, right, to leverage that with detection and response. But there was this sort of theme that's gone through all of these talks that I saw at RSA, and I've heard you say this in the past as well, but it's that the attackers aren't necessarily breaking in to these SaaS applications or really anything that's cloud centric anymore. They're logging in. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a really foundational statement. How does that shift or invalidate, if you will, the way that most security programs are currently structured?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the reality, right? And I think it comes back to some of the legacy approaches, and we understand that. People have moved to a cloud. Cloud's a completely different animal and beast than kind of the old on-prem model. It's highly complicated and complex. You've got your cloud, you've got your SaaS, you've got your identities. Now you have AI, and so that idea that attackers are logging in is kind of at odds with kind of this traditional approach, which is, it's posture based, it's posture based prevention. Let's try to kind of prevent these things. The fact of the matter is that's not quite what's happening with modern cloud attacks, right? They're logging in with compromised and stolen identities. So right away they look like a legitimate user. So
Both human and non-human.
human
Right?
and non-human, and
Yeah.
posture is not designed to that's not going to kind of raise alarms in general, right? They're kind of hijacking OAuth and OAuth grants so that they can bypass MFA and do a host of other things, right? Again, not something that kind of traditional legacy-based security is really looking for, right? You've got a host of third party, and as we talk about, Brian, fourth party, maybe there's even fifth party integrations.
Oh yeah.
And attackers love that because they can go compromise that. They can go focus on that. And then you have kind of loads of APIs into SaaS, right? And so you look at all these kinds of methods, and it just is at odds. It's not going to be addressed by those tools you need, right? They're not going to be addressed, which comes back to what we call this compensating control.
Yeah.
You need a compensating control and a safety net for when attackers are simply logging in. And as you know, it takes seconds to minutes for those attackers to log in with a stolen identity and then move laterally through everything. And you need real-time visibility to be able to, with that compensating control, to kind of stop that, identify it, right? Contain it and prevent that kind of breach impact, right?
Yeah. I think if we looked at the headlines for the top 10 biggest cloud centric or SaaS centric attacks of 2025 and 2026 so far, you hear about shiny hunters and all these other things, scattered spider.
Mm-hmm.
You hear about vishing and phishing and standard attacks where credentials are stolen, to your point, using OAuth to bypass multi-factor authentication. These aren't like 0-day cutting edge kind of exploiting vulnerability types of attacks. These
No.
are kind of like meat and potato stuff. And while I don't want to say they're simple in execution, because I think they execute them in very effective and sometimes very advanced ways,
Mm-hmm.
the fundamental technology below it's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is really one of visibility. Do security leaders are they overestimating the level of visibility and or control that they have in these environments? And if so, what are some of the most dangerous blind spots that they might have because of that cavalier attitude?
It's like that's the $1,000,000 question. So I also wrote a blog before this, and I had this premise, which no decision is the new breach. It comes back to this idea that a lot of leaders in security look at the stack that they have, and it's big and it's deep and it's wide, and it includes all these tools from all these great vendors, right? And they kind of have this mindset that I'm good, right? I think I'm covered, right? And it leads to this kind of inaction, this paralysis of, I understand there are these, there's the sales loft drift campaign. There's kind of the GitHub and GitLab attacks, right? There's the payroll pirates that went into Workday and did the damage. That's scattered spider and all this. But I'm good. The stack I have is good. And it kind of is this overestimation that, they're not going to be hit. Meanwhile, let's just take a recent customer we had. It's a big Fortune 500. They actually understood. They looked at one app, just one SaaS app, and they literally have hundreds. They just took one. They identified about 12 to 15 major gaps that the SSPM identified, right? They estimated the potential risk of those gaps being exploited at $100 million.
Oh.
And their window estimate to close those gaps was 2 years. Okay, so they understood that. And that's an extreme, you can say that's the extreme far upper right case. Just take a fraction of that with other organizations, and it's still potential risk. And that paralysis for others that might not see that exists, right? And so this is where we say, look, we need to come in. SSPM alone, it's not incident first. It doesn't provide that safety net. It doesn't provide the panoramic visibility that the SOC needs across your cloud, your identities, right? Your AI and your SaaS and all of that intermixed together, right? And those posture tools, as we know, Brian, they're not in the purview in the operating loop of a SOC. DevOps and cloud architects and those teams run and own those tools. A SOC, those posture tools, SOC doesn't even get to see them oftentimes. It's not even in their world, like from a SecOps perspective, right? So yeah. This is why that kind of inaction, that kind of hubris that my existing stack, which goodness, it's a big stack and it's impressive, is going to be enough when these kinds of attacks we just talked about occur. And that's where that gap and risk is.
Yeah. I want to double click on posture management because, well, it's more than this. Essentially, when you're talking about on-prem and data centers, it's system hardening. So for decades, we've been turning off clear text protocols and extraneous accounts and disabling certain capabilities and saying, oh, we don't need Python installed on this. And we don't need various compile. There's all these things that we did to harden to make our system stronger.
Right.
But we never felt, well, that's the end of it. We always layered on firewalls and IPS and anti-malware solutions. There's this litany of solutions that have to work, hopefully collectively, but a lot of times they did work in a silo, at least in the early years. But if we say posture management can't close the gap, and we're not saying posture management's bad, but it's not the end-all be-all. So if it doesn't close the gap, what should CISOs be optimizing instead? What's good? Quote unquote, good actually look like in a SaaS first world?
Yeah. And it's great because you can kind of parallel this with endpoint, right? Kind of the on-prem model.
Yeah.
Where eventually traditional antivirus and all those tools, spyware, all the stuff for endpoint wasn't enough. And what happened? Our friends, guys like George Kurtz, brought out EDR, right? I don't think I've met any organization today that does not have EDR deployed. We know that. Now you move to the cloud. It's a similar evolution, right? We have all the tools. You have all the posture. You have the firewalls. You have all of that, right? And we now need a similar control. Let's say it's the EDR for the cloud, which is the cloud detection and response, which brings in that multi-layer, right, and fills that gap. What happens when attackers bypass those tools? You need a layered defense. We now need that safety net so that we can identify that very quickly, right? And we can have AI-powered investigations. We have high-fidelity detections. We can correlate the attack path across your cloud, the SaaS, the identity, and even AI now today, right? Yeah. And we can actually automate response containment and achieve what we focus on, which is preventing the impact of a breach once they get in. And that's that multi-layered approach. And so, it is happening. It is absolutely happening where now, leaders and organizations are understanding. I have EDR on for my endpoints. I understand why I need a similar approach for my cloud, which we call CDR, cloud detection and response. And that just happens to be AI powered and bring in kind of AI detection and response and all this goodness. And SOCs must have that. Organizations must have that. And so that's kind of the equivalency of it, I think, which I like to talk about. Just, At EDR, CDR. It makes sense for most when they're out there. What do you do? What is CDR? And we talk about EDR, and then it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it's a very succinct way to put it. And you're right. I've yet to go into a customer account or a prospect that we're working with, or even a partner, where they say, I just care about AWS, or I just care about my SaaS, or I
Right.
just care about my identity control. And now, of course, it's things like, on the AI side, Bedrock and ChatGPT Enterprise and others like that. And the notion that I will just look at one slice of that and not the other, and not try to follow these usually legitimate identities, either human or non-human,
Yep.
that, especially on the non-human side, but sometimes the human side, administrative privileges, they're super users, they have access to everything to read and write, and you have to be able to follow that thread, because generally speaking, nefarious actors don't say, I'm just going to attack Slack today, or I'm just going to go after GCP. They're going to get into everything they can, and in doing so, they're probably going to do a compromise to identity. And there's to try to solve it, it's like trying to solve a puzzle with 75% of the pieces are lost under the couch, right? You can't,
Exactly.
you simply can't do it. And it makes me think of the Salesforce. So Salesloft Drift, which was just an app that plugged into Salesforce. It was just a chat agent, and they had a compromise earlier through GitHub that gave the bad actors access to the systems, and they used those to then glean information from Salesforce. It wasn't a Salesforce issue. And in many cases, a lot of these folks on the security team probably didn't even know that Salesloft was even plugged in. And to your point earlier, maybe the security team doesn't even have visibility into that. It's just not something they touch. So yeah, you make such a good point. The whole CDR, EDR, visibility, you can't protect your way out of this one. It's not the way things are designed today. But let's, I mentioned Salesloft Drift a little bit, but let's talk about a real incident. So, you've talked to, again, hundreds and hundreds of customers, partners, prospects. What kills an organization faster? Is it not preventing the breach and doing everything you can to try to block it, because once it gets in, we don't have any control? Or is it not being able to understand what's happening quickly enough?
Yeah. And look, in my blog, I mentioned with the no decision is the new breach. I mean, I was fairly provocative. And my point was that CISOs today will get fired for that no decision. Why is that? To your point, it's because they can't answer the most important questions the board or the CEO will want to know in the event of an actual attack getting through or a potential breach. What happened? How did it happen? Is it still active? What did it touch? What did we lose? What was the impact of the breach, right? Those are the questions. Saying, I tried to prevent it and I had all these tools, it is not going to cut it. You need to be able to say, we caught it. We identified it fast, right? We contained it, and we actually stopped and prevented the impact of the breach. We know exactly where they went. We know exactly what they touched. We were able to prevent the impact of the breach. That's what matters, right? If you can't answer those questions, if you can't prevent the impact of a breach, the biggest stack in the world isn't going to actually, help at that point.
And we have to accept, right? And you mentioned this earlier. We've got second, third, fourth, fifth, ... risk based on apps connected to apps and different APIs connected to different APIs. Now AI creating their own APIs. I mean, it's a unending level of connective tissue that makes the cloud so powerful, so effective, so useful for us, but also makes us so vulnerable, and kind of transitions right away from that, trying to prevent everything. I mean, you spell that out so well. So from my perspective, if we accept that perfect prevention is the wrong goal, and I think it is, what's the right metric then? Is it mean time to detect? Is it mean time to contain? Or is it something else entirely?
I mean, I think, look, from a SOC perspective, and CDR lives in the SOC, right? It's built for those teams, SecOps teams. That's their tool, right? And so I tend to look back at what matters in the SOC. It is mean time to detect, mean time to response, right? Mean time to identify, to triage, and all of those are the things that matter, right? We are dealing with seconds and minutes. It's no longer hours and days and God forbid weeks. That's gone. And now we're looking at, AI fueled attacks, and we're looking at now all the infrastructure, the SaaS services that are getting deployed. And you just think in terms of that attack surface and the speed, those speed attacks that are coming from an AI fueled kind of attacks. You don't have hours, you don't have a day, you literally have minutes to hours. So those metrics of mean time to detect, mean time to response, mean time to triage, mean time to stop, all of those are the things that actually matter.
Yeah.
That is what is actually going to prevent the impact. They're going to get through. This is the premise. I'm sorry. They're going to get through. We know this 100%. They're going to get through. They're proving it every day. The question becomes, how quickly will you identify that, detect it, contain, respond, and actually stop and prevent the impact of that, so that you can say, look, they got in. Fine, they got in. Okay, what happened? We stopped it. We contained it. I can answer all the questions, right? And so that is this compensating control. It is absolutely imperative today. And, in my blog, The No Decision is New Breach, I'm concerned. I'm concerned for organizations that have that kind of an action, that they're good, right? While I understand the mindset, we want them. I want them to have that compensating control in place, along with all the other tools they have.
Well, there's a reason it's called cloud detection and response, and not just cloud detection.
Yes.
It would be a little bit silly if we didn't have the ability to rapidly respond, either directly or through some integration with SIM, SOAR, hyperautomation, agentic SOC, whatever it is that you think you want to do, whether it's human in the loop, on the loop, whatever paradigm you want to leverage, it has to be rapid. And it's so interesting because you and I are hearing this a lot more. It used to be that security teams, especially CISOs, were really, really iffy about being so cavalier to actually stop something that looks potentially suspicious without having all the empirical evidence to say, yes, it absolutely is. Now, because of AI and the speed at which these attacks are coming, they're responding much more quickly and saying, you know what? We're going to go ahead and disable that account. We're going to quarantine that asset, ... We're going to do all these different things. And look, if we made a mistake, mea culpa, right? We'll go ahead and re-enable that account. We'll take that asset out of quarantine, and things will be good. But they have to be able to move much more quickly with sometimes imperfect information. So you're trying to get that information as close to perfect. It'll never be perfect, but as close to perfect as you possibly can to do those automated or in many cases semi-automated responses. And to your point, if not seconds, maybe minutes or hours, as opposed to weeks, months, and years, right? To actually address something.
Huge point. Absolutely huge point, right? Organizations have to be much more pragmatic with that approach today. You don't have a choice. It's AI against AI. Now, we can make some of those decisions, those automated decisions, reversible. We can do that. We can effectively make those decisions reversible. You may have a human in the loop just to actually, approve that final decision. Maybe you don't. I think we're going to need to get to a point where no, we don't have time often to have humans in the loop. As long as we can make some of those decisions reversible, right? We will make mistakes. Then that's the way we have to do it. But you're exactly right. It has to move incredibly fast. And the complexity of it matters, right? It has to tie together the cloud, all the identities, human, non-human, across all the SaaS applications, right? And now all the AI, all those AI services and everything within that. It has to bring that all together. And you just think that's a massive job to do that. This is actually, I wake up every day and I'm amazed at the technology that we have from a CDR perspective. It is quite awesome, because just a SOC understanding one SaaS app alone is incredibly complex. And then you ask them, well, tie together the identity and what cloud is it on? And is it a non-human? Is it touching an AI? And, quickly one app it's impossible. You just think tying all that together. So it's quite incredible. And, all of that being AI powered now makes this happen. And I know, You're doing it. You're doing an incredible webcast coming up with Torque, and I only say that because it brings in this idea of the AI SOC, the autonomous SOC, the agentic SOC, which is what that's going to have to be, where you're making those decisions so rapidly, right? So.
Yeah. Having a level of automation, whether it's fully automated or semi-automated, whatever variable that you want for that, it's essential. And to your point, if you take a look at some of these logs from, we'll take all the cloud and identity and AI off the table. We'll just talk about SaaS to keep it simple.
Yeah.
They're all over the place. Some are SQL, some are flat files, some are, you have to look at 5 different sources within the logging context in order to figure out who a specific user is. There's a lot of complexity, and you pull up these JSON blobs, and sometimes they're not well documented, and it's a lot of work. And if you try to do it after the fact during an incident, good luck. It's a problem. And when I was at RSA, one of the talks I gave, I was talking about, remember when we were all in college and we took differential equations, and when we were done, we're like, thank God that's over. I'm never, ever going to use that again. Well, yeah. Take a look at a Salesforce JSON blob. You kind of need it. But yeah, the complexity level is quite high. So John, thanks so much for this. This was great. If people want to check out this blog or some of your other blogs or some of the other papers and stuff you've written, where's the best place for them to find that?
Yeah, like go read the blogs. We have some, really, and our blogs are great because we come with our blogs from a research perspective, which is, sometimes we're talking and coming and publishing research that's brand new across some of these attacks and across some of the gaps in SaaS. I've written many blogs. Go look at those. As well, on this discussion, where we kind of touched not only on posture, but coming a little bit with things like SSPM. I just released a brand new, what I call insight brief. It comes more from almost like a research perspective, and it outlines the top 5 reasons why you may want to deploy a cloud detection and response platform before yet another posture tool like SSPM, at the very least, or in conjunction with SSPM, to have that compensating control. And you can find that on the website. On our website, just look for that. We've got a lot of informative briefs and lots of research to look at. So have at it. Mitiga.io, go take a look. And of course, our YouTube channel is very robust as well. You can see a lot of interviews you've done with our research team that are tremendously informative across what's happening in
Mitiga Labs is amazing. And the technical research, I mean, they are at the tip of the spear when it comes to this stuff. And I actually love reading their blogs, and they're not sales pitches, or I mean, they're in the weeds tech. So if you'd like to get down and deep, the Mitiga Lab stuff is amazing.
100%.
Well, John, thanks again for joining and being part of Mitiga Mic.
Thanks, Brian. It was awesome. Let's do it again, my friend.
Absolutely.